Alright folks, first of all let me start by saying sorry, there was no video yesterday. Honestly, when I sat down to record there just wasn't much worth talking about. I even had a quick look at a few other topics I could have touched on, but it felt like nobody would really be in the mood for yet another deep dive into the squad depth. So I decided it was better just to leave it for the day and come back when there was actually something happening. Thankfully today's brought a bit more to get into, transfers, club news, and sadly something a bit more emotional as well. Yesterday we got the heartbreaking news that John Clark, one of the true Lisbon Lions, and a Celtic legend in every sense, had passed away at the age of 84. It's hard to even put into words what a figure like John Clark meant to this club, and to Scottish football as a whole. For those who maybe aren't as familiar with the older generations of Celtic heroes, John was a key part of that iconic team that won the European Cup in 1967. He joined Celtic way back in 1958, coming from a small local side called Lark Hall Thistle. He was just 17 at the time, still just a boy with dreams of making it at the top level. It didn't happen overnight for him. It took a couple of seasons of hard work, grit, and determination before he really established himself in the first team. But by the start of the 1960-61 season, John Clark was there to stay. Back then he played what was known as the left half position. Now for the younger fans or anyone who didn't grow up hearing those old school football terms, think of it like a kind of left-sided center back or maybe even a defensive midfielder. Depending on how you look at it, football's changed a lot since then, but his role was pretty simple. Win the ball, protect the defense, and sweep up anything that got through. That sweeping up role was exactly what earned him the nickname the Brush. While Billy McNeil would go and attack every cross, every high ball, throwing himself into challenges and leading by example as the aerial powerhouse, John Clark would be there in the background, cool as you like, tidying up everything else. The nickname might not have been the most creative thing in the world. Let's be honest, the 1960s weren't exactly famous for their inventive footballing nicknames, but it fit him perfectly. And like so many players from that golden era, it was under Jock Stein that John Clark truly flourished. The glory years really kicked off in the mid-60s, and Clark was right at the heart of it all. He was part of that historic quintuple-winning team in the 1966-67 season. 5 trophies in one campaign, capped off with that unforgettable night in Lisbon. When people today look back at that Lisbon Lions team, the first names that usually come to mind are Billy McNeil for obvious reasons, Jimmy Johnstone with all his flair and trickery, or guys like Bobby Lennox and Bertie Auld. But ask anyone who watched that team week in week out back then and they'll tell you John Clark was every bit as important. Maybe he didn't grab the headlines as much, but inside that dressing room and among the fans who really knew their football, he was anything but underappreciated. Jock Stein knew exactly how valuable he was. Week after week, game after game, Clark was there doing the hard yards, never complaining, never looking for the limelight. In fact, funnily enough, only the players from that legendary Lisbon Lions squad were ever present throughout that entire European Cup winning season. One was Tommy Gemmell, the other John Clark. That says it all, really. The consistency, the reliability, the sheer dependability of the man. Between April 1965 and September 1967, John Clark played 140 consecutive matches for Celtic. Let that sink in for a second. 140 games in a row. These days players miss matches for the smallest knocks or rotation reasons. Back then Clark just laced up his boots and got on with it. After his incredible run at Celtic, he eventually moved on in 1970, signing for Greenock Morton, which with all due respect isn't exactly the biggest name in Scottish football, but even there he left his mark in the most John Clark way possible. There's this brilliant little piece of trivia: when he played against Celtic for Morton, he actually scored an own goal. So even after leaving the club, he still managed to score for Celtic. And anyone who knows Clark's career will tell you scoring goals wasn't exactly his trademark. On the international stage, Clark's Scotland career was surprisingly modest in terms of numbers, just 4 caps to his name, which for a Lisbon Lion does feel a bit light, doesn't it? But if you read up on Scottish football from that era, you'll quickly realize the level of competition for places was just ridiculous. Scotland were blessed with talent all over the park back then. Still, those 4 caps include one particularly memorable moment. His debut came in a 1-1 draw against Brazil at Hampden Park, in front of 75,000 fans. Not bad for a first cap, and if marking one of the greatest players in football history sounds like a daunting task, that's exactly what John Clark was asked to do that night. His job was to keep Pelé quiet and by all accounts he did a fantastic job. Pele barely got a kick that evening thanks in no small part to Clark's defensive masterclass. But of course it's with Celtic where Clark's heart always remained. Even after hanging up his boots, he just couldn't stay away from the club. He came back in 1973, first working with the youth team and reserve squad, passing on all that knowledge and experience to the next generation. Then came the next chapter alongside his great friend Billy McNeil, on the pitch, off the pitch. Their bond was unbreakable. Clark became Billy's assistant manager, first at Aberdeen and then back at Celtic. Together they formed a formidable duo, leading the team through some challenging but memorable times. And here's something that not everyone knows: John Clark even had his own spells in management, short ones admittedly, but still worth mentioning. He took charge at Stranraer and later at Clyde during the 1980s and early 90s. It wasn't at the same glittering heights as his playing days, but it showed once again his dedication to football at all levels. For many fans of my generation, though, the image of John Clark that comes to mind first isn't of him as a player, assistant manager, or even as a manager. It's as our iconic kitman. For the best part of 2 decades there, he was making sure everything behind the scenes was running smoothly, working with managers like Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Brendan Rodgers. Clark was always there in the background, doing his job with the same professionalism and pride he showed on the pitch. And what makes that even more incredible is the fact that he carried on in that role well beyond the usual age most people would have retired. We're talking well into his 70s, still showing up every day, still maintaining the highest standards. There's a brilliant article I came across recently, and it talked about how even in that kitman role, Clark was someone players, young and old, would lean on for advice and support. I mean, why wouldn't they? This was a man who'd seen it all, won it all, and live and breathe Celtic for decades. One story that sticks in my mind is from shortly after Billy McNeil passed away. You might remember when Athletic Club from Bilbao awarded McNeil the One Club Man Award. Sadly, Billy wasn't there to receive it, but John Clark, along with Billy's daughter Susan, traveled to Spain to collect the award on his behalf. That to me just sums up the kind of man John Clark was: loyal, humble, and forever representing Celtic with class and dignity. If you actually sit down and count the years, Clark gave around 50 years of his life to this football club in one capacity or another. From player to youth coach, assistant manager to kitman, and finally as an ambassador, the man never stopped serving Celtic. It's a level of dedication you just don't see very often in football anymore. And maybe my favorite quote of his, one that really captures the essence of John Clark, is this: "I never wanted any of that fame or celebrity. It wasn't me. I preferred being in the background." That's just perfect, isn't it? Quiet, dependable, loyal, one of Celtic's greatest ever servants without a shadow of a doubt. Now switching gears a bit, and it feels strange to do so after talking about someone like John Clark, but let's dive into the current stuff going on around Celtic, especially on the transfer front. There's been a fair bit of noise online about potential incomings and outgoings, and the one name that keeps popping up is Nicholas Kuhn. Over the past few days there's been growing speculation that he might be on the verge of leaving Celtic, with RB Leipzig being the club most heavily linked. To be honest, I hadn't been paying too much attention to the rumors at first. You know how it is this time of year: the transfer window opens, and suddenly every player's being linked with a move somewhere. But the talk about Leipzig seems to be gathering pace. Reports from Germany, particularly from the well-known football magazine Kicker, suggest that negotiations between Celtic and Leipzig have reached an advanced stage. Now, I did have a look to see if I could find the original article from Kicker themselves online, but it seems like it's something that was printed in their latest physical edition, and then picked up by other outlets both in Germany and here in Scotland. When you add this to the previous reports from last week where Scottish outlets were already linking Leipzig with Kuhn, it does feel like there's something happening behind the scenes. Even without Leipzig having a permanent manager in place right now, they clearly seem to be making moves in the transfer market and lining up targets. And let's not forget, Kuhn has history with Leipzig, having played there before. Plus there's the small matter of him scoring twice against them last season, which probably didn't go unnoticed. So how are we all feeling about this potential move? Honestly, I'm a bit torn. On one hand, I completely understand why Kuhn would want the transfer. Playing in the Bundesliga at a higher level with a chance to push himself into the Germany national team conversation, it all makes sense from his point of view. The German league is obviously a step up from the Scottish Premiership in terms of visibility and competition. And for a player in his prime years, it's understandable that he'd want to take that next step. From Celtic's perspective, though, it's a tougher call. I think the big question is whether we believe Kuhn can get back to the level he showed in the first half of last season. Let's be honest, during that spell, he was one of the most exciting wingers we've seen at Celtic Park in years. Not just domestically, but in Europe too, he was electric. But then the second half of the season came along and his form dipped massively. Some would say it started after the Bayern Munich tie. But thinking back, I reckon the drop-off happened even earlier, maybe just after the turn of the year. There's that nagging doubt about whether he mentally checked out, especially with all the talk about Celtic being a stepping stone for him. I remember comments from his agent last season that hinted at that, praising Celtic as a great platform for players to launch bigger moves. It does make you wonder if we've already seen the best of Kuhn in a Celtic shirt. Financially though, it's hard to argue with the potential deal. We paid around £3 million to bring him in from Rapid Vienna, and now we're talking about selling him for around $15 million. That's 5 times the investment in just 18 months. It's not quite on the same scale as some of the other big sales we've seen recently like Matt O'Reilly or Kieran Tierney. But it's still excellent business. And with that money, there's the chance to bring in a new right winger, someone hungry with something to prove. That's probably what we need. Kuhn could easily have a brilliant season next year, but equally there's a real risk he continues on the same downward trajectory we saw towards the end of last season. It's a gamble either way. Speaking of replacements, there's been a lot of chat about Benji the winger we're being linked with. Some see him more as a midfielder, others swear he's a winger. From what I've seen online, he's mainly described as a winger, but to me, he doesn't look particularly quick, almost feels more like a midfielder playing out wide. But whatever his true position is, if we can bring him in for a fraction of the price we'd get for Kuhn and he turns out to be a solid option on the right, I'd be fairly happy with that. Elsewhere in the squad, there's more movement expected. Nad Phillips looks set for a move to West Bromwich Albion with a fee of around £3 million. Gustav Lagerbiel is also coming back from his loan at FC Twente, where he's already posted a farewell message to their fans on Instagram. 3 years left on his Celtic contract, but I'd be surprised if he sticks around. Same goes for Make Nawrocki and Stephen Welch. I can't really see a future for any of those three at the club. And finally, just a quick note on transfer budget chat. According to reports, Celtic are ready to spend big this summer, with at least one major signing expected. Last season we spent around £40 million across both windows, with over £30 million of that coming last summer alone. Given that and looking at the relatively cheap deals we've done so far with players like Tierney and potentially Benji, it does make you wonder where the big money's going to be spent. My guess, center back, striker, or central midfield. We'll just need to wait and see. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. There's a quiet murmur making its way through the east end of Glasgow. And if the whispers are true, Benjamin NYGREN may well be the latest talent to pull on the famous green and white hoops of Celtic, while there's been no official word from Parkhead just yet. Reports coming out of Sweden and a few trusted footballing circles suggest that the 22-year-old forward has penned a 4-year deal with the boys. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Nothing has been confirmed by the club. And as with all transfer talk at this time of year, a healthy dose of skepticism is required. But there's enough noise to suggest there could be something bubbling beneath the surface. NYGREN, once a teen sensation at IFK Göteborg before making the switch to Belgian side Genk, has had a curious journey thus far, including stints in Denmark with FC Nordjylland, where his flashes of brilliance caught the eye of scouts across Europe. It's understood Celtic have been monitoring the Swedish winger for some time, intrigued by his blend of technical flair and intelligent movement in the final third. Sources close to the deal hint that discussions have been ongoing for weeks, with Celtic looking to bolster their attacking options ahead of a Champions League qualifying campaign. A 4-year contract would signal a long-term investment, something Brendan Rodgers has been vocal about since his return to the club. While fans will be eagerly awaiting an official unveiling or a telltale social media post, for now, it remains a tantalizing rumor. But in a summer where Celtic are expected to make several strategic moves in the market, the potential arrival of Benjamin NYGREN could be the first piece of the puzzle. Whether it's all smoke and mirrors or a deal quietly wrapped up behind closed doors, only time will tell, but the buzz around Paradise is growing louder by the day. Hello, fan, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, Share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.